Casey Middaugh.
It's just gonna be tonally so different. That's what Solo Month is about, right? Just solo shows that are very, very, very different from each other. Thank you. Just a moment. Can we go to the next slide? This is my grandmother. Her name is Ruth Bailey Norton, and it is important to note that Ruth is spelled with an E, because at 13 she decided that that would look cooler. She was born on July 8th, 1929 in the Ravenna neighborhood of Seattle. She is the middle of 3 children. She has an older brother and a younger brother. She went to Roosevelt High School and then to the University of Washington, where she studied chemistry and was an active member of the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority. Next slide. She married Francis Avery Norton in 1952, and they had 2 children, Andrew Avery Norton in 1957, and my mother, Elizabeth Ann Norton, in 1959. Ruth and Frank were avid travelers and very outdoorsy, climbing mountains, camping, sailing, and skiing into their 80s. Next one. She has 2 grandchildren, my twin sister and I. We call her Granny, and she dotes on us. Next one. In fairness, we dote on her too. Next one. Next one. So what is Alzheimer's? It's some bullshit is what Alzheimer's is. I'm not sure when we figured out that she has Alzheimer's. I know that in the wake of my grandfather's death, her grief was all-encompassing, and she began to lose capacity. She stopped quilting, stopped cooking, stopped being able to reliably Skype with my parents who live in Taiwan and my aunt and uncle who live in Chicago. And it was unclear as to whether or not that was because she was mourning a beloved husband of over 62 years, or if there was something more, something in addition to. Eventually, I took Grammy to a neurologist. The doctor was a kind-faced woman who had a shaggy ginger dog who would lumber into the office with her, flop onto her feet, and then proceed to blend in almost entirely with the wooden floor. Grammy liked the dog and hated the neurologist. I think what she really hated was the tests. She's a smart lady, and she knew something was wrong. An early sign of Alzheimer's is losing abstract reasoning. And when the neurologist asked Grammy what the aphorism, "people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones," meant, she responded, "Well, the glass will break, and that wouldn't be very nice, would it?" And then she chuckled. And I excused myself and went to go cry in the bathroom. After 3 appointments, I promised her I wouldn't take her back there. It's not like there's much you can do for Alzheimer's anyway. Next one. My grandmother was an avid quilter, an extraordinary and prolific quilter. She had whole bookshelves filled with quilting books and patterns. And at the end of her quilting, in the last couple of years before my grandfather died, she was making 4 to 6 quilts a year, machine pieced and all hand quilted. An activity she would do sitting by the large bay windows in her retirement home apartment in South Lake Union. In addition to the number of quilts she made increasing dramatically, they also just kept getting bigger. Next one. I'm gonna need some volunteers. I'm gonna show you one to start with. So this is the first quilt that she ever made for me, specifically that I got to help choose. And she was very into batik fabrics at the time, And she had made my sister this beautiful, beautiful quilt that's like purples and oranges, because my sister understands like what color stories are and I don't. And she brought me into the fabric store and was like, just choose any of the batik fabrics that you like. So I did. I chose all of them. And then we brought them to the cutting table, and the woman was like, you're putting these together? But my grandmother is a magician. All of her quilts are signed and have names on them. This one is called Sparkle Starshine, which was a name that my parents threatened to give us before we were born, just for some hippie shit. Created with love for Casey Norton Middaugh by Grammy, Ruth Bailey Norton, 2006. Now I need helpers. Because that's what size they started at. It just got fucking bigger and bigger. So this was the last one she made me.
Wow, that has a color story.
This one is called Sunny Days. D-A-Z-E. Thank you. Next one. In retrospect, an early sign of her dementia was when she was making the last quilt she ever made for me and asked me to change the pattern I had chosen. The pattern was too confusing and she got lost in it. I tried to help and then asked her to choose whatever pattern she wanted. It was clear that making the quilt was more for her than it was for me anyway. Next one. Moving Grammy to assisted living was heartbreaking and necessary. She had been setting fires while trying to cook potato soup and had been in and out of the hospital due to falls and accidents stemming from improper pill dispensing. The staff at the retirement home tried to get us to consider memory care, a ward with a locked door and a circular floor plan. But memory care felt like prison, something to do as a last resort. We knew we'd end up there eventually, but not yet. Right? We started working with a home care worker. Sorry, guys. Having negotiated out as a family what our warning signs would be, that I, the only family member in Seattle and the de facto caregiver, needed more help. And we blew past those warning signs within a week. I had said, I need Grammy to stop calling me at 5 in the morning and 11 p.m. at night, I said, forgetting that the reason that I had these specific times in mind were because she was already doing that. Grammy's dementia was still new and we weren't sure how to approach it. So my aunt wanted to introduce the new home care worker, Lisa, as my friend, just in case Grammy bristled at having someone that she didn't love in her space. On the first day, I wanted to be there to introduce them and to get the ball rolling. We had a nice, short visit when Grammy decided to take a nap. She walked from the living room to her bedroom, and she seemed a little unsteady, so I followed, which meant that I was there to catch her when she fell, and I prevented her head from hitting anything on the way down. And it was terrifying. And Lisa, to her absolute credit and my eternal gratitude, immediately called the front desk and then 911. Next one. The retirement home asked that she have someone with her overnight, every night. Her apartment had huge windows that looked out over South Lake Union, so the view was constantly changing as new buildings went up and old buildings were torn down. It was dark and it was late and she was agitated. We were sitting in the living room with the only light coming from the cityscape below us. I asked her if she wanted to sing. I quickly ran out of songs that we both knew and Googled popular hymns, figuring that at least some of them, a lifetime of snuggling with her in Presbyterian pews would have prepared us for. So looking out at this view, I sang this. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy present my light. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. We took a tour of the assisted living apartment. We looked at the dining room and the mail room and poked around in the closet and met some of the residents on the floor. She got quieter and quieter, and the staff talked more and more, clearly panicked that we wouldn't actually choose this option. I asked if we could have a quiet moment, just a minute, and brought her back up to her apartment with the view of the city and the lake and sat with her quietly. Do you think this is the right thing to do? I do, Grammy. I think it's time. And then we sat there and gently cried, holding hands. My grandma and I have always been friends. A fact that delights me is that we both independently did a thought experiment and decided that if we had been in school together, somehow or another been the same age, we would have been friends. We used to play Mastermind, which is a game where you make a set of patterns with colored pegs and the other person tries to guess them. And my grandmother would guess my patterns in one guess over and over and over again. And I would try to change the colors or change up my system or change the pattern, and she would still get it right because we were that in sync. When we were at Granny and Grandpa's house, which was at least once a week, we were always very well groomed. Ribbons in our hair and matching or coordinating dresses that she had made for us. We also pissed each other off to no end. I thought she was judgmental and pushy, and she would get frustrated at me for never smiling properly in photos or brushing my hair. Next one. I don't know what she's talking about. But mostly we thought each other were fun and loved fiercely. I became the go-to person in the family to convince Grammy to do something she might not want to do or to break bad news. This was because we'd made each other cry in the past and we knew that we could work through it. Also, I'm a big fan of facing big issues head on. Assisted living was a good choice. Her pills were moderated by nurses on staff, her meals were provided for her, and her view included a new dog park across the street where she could watch dozens of purebred dogs because of Amazon at any hour of the week. Her home care worker kept dropping by, and we got another couple so that every day there was someone with her for at least a couple of hours. She wanted a cell phone because she'd seen other people using apps and she was jealous. She never quite got the hang of using a cell phone though, and then she lost the ability to use the landline reliably, and I stopped getting heart-stopping phone calls in the middle of the night. She worried that my grandfather didn't have anything to eat or anything to wear, asked us where he was, and then to my quiet horror started talking about how she needed a new husband. She, who had woken up holding hands with my grandfather every morning of their marriage. Eventually, She started shifting from talking about my grandfather, whose ashes she kept in a cardboard box on the floor, and how he had never visited her, and started asking me to drive her home. She needed to take care of her mother, needed to deliver the large family Bible to her father. She was shocked to discover I had never been to her mother's home. We learned not to tell her that family members were dead, because it would cause 2 days of horrifying grief. My sister got really good at letting her know that my grandfather would be there if he could. And I would tell her that I had taken the bus that day, and so I couldn't give her a ride home. 2 months ago, she got picked up by the police. She had tried to go to the dog park herself and had gotten lost. I don't know how she ended up with the police, but I'm grateful that she wasn't hurt. The retirement home decided to administer a test and labeled her a high elopement risk. At first, my uncle and I, who share the legal responsibility for my grandmother, were affronted. She'd only wandered off once. But we quickly changed our tune. My uncle discovered that of the lawsuits involved with elopements from care facilities, 70% of them are because of the death of the resident. Risk factors for elopement include getting lost in the building, wanting to visit dead family members, things she had been doing for over a year. The state mandates that anyone labeled a high elopement risk have 24-hour one-to-one care or be in a locked facility. Memory care at our retirement home was full, and we found ourselves in the awkward position of hoping someone would die soon so that we could move her in. We had a rotating bunch of truly lovely carers, and it cost $27,000 a month. On top of what we were already paying. This picture is taken from when my sister and I were 15. I think we're at my grandma's church around Christmas time. Next one. This picture is from 20 years later. About a month ago, Grammy was agitated about the homeless people staying in her room, the new caregivers who stayed overnight, and was refusing to let anyone into her space or take any of her pills. I scooped her up, called my sister, and we met them at North Star Diner at 5 p.m. on a Monday afternoon. She delightedly watched toddlers being goofy and devoured a huge plate of fish and chips. It was a good visit. Alzheimer's is a terminal disease. My grandparents met on top of a mountain, and that mountain remained important to them for the rest of their lives. When she dies, we're going to take my grandfather out of the cardboard box and mix their ashes together and spread them on top of the mountain. On a flight to visit my parents in Taiwan, my grandmother and I both watched Les Mis. She loves the show, but her TV was about 30 seconds ahead of mine. And I'd never seen the show, nor had I ever listened to the whole thing. But I could always tell when a song was showing up because she would start beating the rhythm on my leg because she was so excited. And now she's there, at least 30 seconds ahead of where we think she is. And we're just going to have to keep trying to figure it out and catch up the best we can. Thanks.